Welcome back, everyone, to the It's Official podcast. He's Jeff Siegel. I'm Jeremy Plonk, representing Express Bet and First Bet. Derby's in the air. Preakness is in the air. This week, there's a lot going on. The preliminaries towards the Kentucky Derby, horses gathering in Louisville. We've got 3 automatic qualifiers to the Preakness coming up this week. And, Jeff, there was a big weekend at Oaklawn last week that's going to be very high in our attention in our top 5 topics this week to discuss.
The racing really did live up to its billing, didn't it, last weekend? Sometimes you see races that are unsatisfying. Either the favorites don't fire or you get a crazy result that you can't, explain. But both at Oaklawn and Keeneland, I think the form held, and we got a glimpse of the future. The horses that were supposed to run well ran well, and I think we'll see them come back in a month or so. And it's exciting times, not just for the 3-year-olds, obviously, but for the older horses and the grass horses as well. Very good racing last week. Hopefully it'll keep up in the next several weeks, and we'll continue to enjoy top-class racing.
Yeah, and from a handicapping standpoint, I felt like Mike Tyson Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then I was Glass Joe from the Punch-Out video game, the easiest out in the first round on Saturday and Sunday. It's a humbling game, this handicapping and horse racing. So it was the best of times. It was the worst of times over a 5-day week at Keeneland. We'll see how it shakes out this week. We got another week of racing, week 3 of that meet coming up in just about 24 hours time. All right, to our 5 topics this week as we review. Speaking of Keeneland, we go back to Keeneland, where on Saturday, it seemed like you wanted to be up front in most of the races, certainly around 1 turn. It didn't hurt to be on top around 2 turns. The old oval in Lexington was shaking out for speed, and Florent Giroux aboard Encino took advantage and took the initiative fully in the Lexington Stakes.
Encino leading the Wine Steward. The Wine Steward starts to move off the rail as they come to the quarter pole, still a length off the lead, though. Secret Chat goes to 3rd, still 5 from the front. Dilger is 4th on his outside. Hades is still some 10 lengths off the lead, top of the short stretch. Encino, the leader. The Wine Steward is right alongside. These two now going at it, moving into the final furlong. Gap of 5 more lengths to Dilger and then Secret Chat. Encino with a neck in front. The Wine Steward is 2nd. Encino giving everything he's got. Turns back the challenge and wins the Stone Street Lexington under Florent Giroux.
Big effort there from the winner of the Battaglia Memorial, a race that's turned out to be pretty key. The Battaglia produced Epic Ride, who was 3rd in the Bluegrass 2 weeks ago. And then last weekend, we just saw Epic Ride with the return effort there. How good can this Godolphin homebred be, Jeff? Brad Cox has won this race, 4 of the last 5 years. He's gotten those horses all to the Triple Crown Series, save for last year when First Mission was injured. This horse seems destined for a Triple Crown race. Kentucky Derby Preakness coming up next for Encino. We'll see which one they decide to go for.
Well, I really give credit here to Florent Giroux because in handicapping this race, I thought the Wine Steward from the rail, I thought Louis Sires would let him roll out of there, and he broke well, and then all of a sudden took a hold, and before he knew it, Encino had crossed over in front of him, and that was the race. Now, the Wine Steward definitely had his chance, and I'm getting to think that maybe the Wine Steward, as good a horse as I think he is, and I think he's a really nice 3-year-old, maybe better around 1 turn because in the 2 races I saw at Keeneland, both times he kind of lost his punch. He tried hard. He just didn't have the punch. He did finish 8 lengths in front of everybody else, so he ran well. The 94 buyer number for Encino is solid. It's not quite good enough to win a Derby. And he did it on the lead, which is the pristine way to do it. So I don't know how much better Encino can be, but he's a nice horse. He's by Nyquist, so he certainly could be better than that. And now it's just a matter of what they want to do with him.
Cox has brought horses straight to the Derby out of this race. He's brought like Tawny Port, and they've had a little bit of success. Last year, Disarm for Rasmussen got beat in the Lexington, came back and ran 4th. You needed him for the Superfecta in the Kentucky Derby. So a horse can come back on this short rest in a couple weeks' time and run well in the Kentucky Derby. But Cox has also had success waiting for the Preakness with horses like Owendale coming out of this race, who then went on to run 3rd in the Preakness Stakes. If you had George Ruthers, if you're running the operation for Godolphin, well, you're laced with a lot of money in your pockets at that point. But if you're running the operation for Godolphin, where do you want to go with this horse?
I don't want to go to the Kentucky Derby. I don't think he's up to winning a race like that. I think he's a progressive colt who can – this is the kind of colt I want to protect. I want to be able to run him in races that aren't going to break him. I don't want him going backwards, and you gradually work your way up to a point where you have no choice but to run in a race like, I don't know, the Monmouth race, or Haskell or the Jim Dandy, and then you can test him. But right now, throwing him against Fierceness and those kind of horses, I don't think he's good enough. I don't think he's ready enough. It's not like it's their only horse anyway. So I would back off a little bit, and maybe whatever the race you want to choose in, just try to avoid the best in the division. The Wine Steward, I'd love to see him go a 1-turn mile or 7/8, something like that. I think he'd be really good. The rest of them are just not of that level. But those two colts, I think, have a chance to win a lot of purse money this year if they're allowed to do what they're capable of doing, and not much more than that.
The horses who tried to cram for points, it did not work out, right? Hades, the horse who had won the Holy Bull and has run 2 clunkers since, he was no factor at all. Liberal Arts, who melted down with an excuse in Arkansas, had no excuse on Saturday. He just was not any good on the 14-day turnaround at all. I don't know where he stands. I may have overrated him completely at this point, but he and Hades, neither looks like a Triple Crown kind of horse off of their effort this past weekend. Again, both on short rest. Maybe if they get a break now and rest up to the Belmont, maybe you could see those kind of horses try that, but who knows? It's about wisdom at this point, right? I mean, do you want to throw a horse in one of these Triple Crown races with very little chance of winning and taking a chance, or do you want to take that kind of conservative path, right? And which way do you want to go is going to be with some of these also rans, because the top of the division feels like it's got some definition to it now. And we were searching for that for several months, Jeff, but it seems like we seem to have some definition at the top. And that's where we're going to go next, to our Triple Crown tracker, and the segment that we've done each week for the last couple of months. We've got 5 segments of the Triple Crown tracker this week. First off, we're going to go down to our friends at Gulfstream Park, where they caught up with Todd Pletcher and the favorite. We talked about definitive leaders in this division. Now it's about Fierceness. Let's get the latest on Fierceness from the folks at Gulfstream Park.
We've always had a lot of confidence in his ability, and we were disappointed with the outcome of the Holy Bull, but we hadn't lost confidence in the horse and the way it trained leading up to the Florida Derby. We expected a good performance, but that was kind of a wow performance.
This morning was his first work, obviously just a maintenance work, but are you happy with everything since the Florida Derby?
Great since the Florida Derby. His energy level's been good. He seemed to take the race really well. Just had a nice easy breeze this morning, was moving great, and really just couldn't be happier with him. We'll get his next work here at Palm Beach Downs, and then we'll make a decision on when we're going to ship to Churchill. We have to be there by 11 a.m. on the Saturday before, so there's a good chance we'll have our final breeze at Churchill, but I want to leave the window open if I don't like the way the weather's looking in Kentucky. So right now I'm glad we've stayed where we are. We've had a really great weather, and it hasn't been too hot. The mornings have been nice and cool. We've had minimal rain, just enough to keep the track good, and haven't had to battle some of the conditions that that are going on in Kentucky at the moment. So we'll monitor it and be ready to call an audible if we need to. I mean, what can you do? He ran that well. It didn't seem to be a stressful race on him. He came to the wire with his ears pricked. Johnny seemingly never asked him at any point, but yeah, of course you're concerned that he'll not run back the same race, but all we can focus on is keeping him happy and healthy, and check all the boxes that we can, and then we got to hope, like everyone else, to get away cleanly and work out a good trip. It doesn't get old. It's it's exciting. It's also kind of an anxious 3 more weeks. We've had a really good 2 weeks since the Florida Derby, and now we just, like everyone else, hope everything continues to stay on course.
Of course, Todd Pletcher, a 2-time Kentucky Derby winner, but he's also had the disappointment, like he said, anxious weeks to come with the favorite like this. Uncle Mo was scratched, 2011 as the favorite for the Kentucky Derby, and then Of course, last year, Forte on the morning of the race scratched and taken out of the Kentucky Derby. So some anxious times, obviously, when you're handling the favorite. That workout was on the 12th. You heard them say today in the video. That was from the 12th of April. So he would be scheduled back. That was last Friday. He'd be scheduled back on a week's time. Jeff, to work again on Friday. Look at the weather and whether they work on Friday or Saturday. And of course, if they do get to Churchill and get that final work over the track at Churchill Downs, that'll be a very light maintenance work. The one Derby week, the one that comes on entry day this year, because entry day is the Saturday before the Kentucky Derby. The big works are to come this weekend. So the big work for Fierceness will be this last one at Palm Beach Downs coming up either Friday or Saturday if he stays on schedule.
I don't think you're going to see anything fast. It's not Pletcher's style to train him and hone him like for example, Bob Baffert's got a different style that works for both. But this colt, he'll go off slow and easy and then gallop out and probably gallop out 7/8, although they won't give him that time. But the way I watched that last work, I mean, he looks terrific to me, Jeremy. I can't knock him other than the two bad races that he had, one of which I don't really hold against him, which was the one in the second start of his career when he broke terrible in the slop and got a dumb ride where he kind of got left, rushed up, made this crazy premature move, and then was spent. But fortunately was taken care of in the final furlong when the case became hopeless. The disappointing run at Gulfstream earlier this year was hard to handle, but he came back and ran well. And if he doesn't make any mistakes in Kentucky, he's going to be hard to beat. I mean, there's no getting around it.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can talk about the Holy Bull being a disappointment, but we've had a chance to wash that memory away. If that's the last impression you have of him, you're like, wow, the champ's vulnerable. But the last impression we have of him makes that Holy Bull look like the aberration. You know, I mean, the real race seemed to be, the real fierceness seemed to be the Florida Derby. And if he repeats that again, they are in for a heck of a tussle trying to beat him, all things even. The trip, we'll see. And the situation, we'll see. Everybody's going to be a new paddock at Churchill Downs. It's going to be new to everybody. But the hubbub of the Derby is unlike any other. Who handles it, who doesn't, is all part of the formula and the mystery and why we love the race so much. At Churchill Downs already, some big names have arrived at Churchill. Forever Young, the UAE Derby winner via Japan, via Saudi Arabia. He is now at Churchill Downs. He's trained there over the past couple mornings. No official workouts, but he's been out galloping. He's cleared quarantine, so all systems go for Forever Young. Over the weekend, we did have some workers of note. Honor Marie has worked. Catching Freedom, the Louisiana Derby winner for Brad Cox, has worked. Mystic Dan, Common Defense, couple Kenny McPeaks worked this weekend. And we've seen two works from Endlessly, the winner of the Jeff Ruby on synthetic, winner of the El Camino Real Derby on synthetic, winner of Turf Stakes at Del Mar Santa Anita on turf. The big question is dirt for Endlessly, Jeff. And we're going to get a chance to see, courtesy of Kevin Kirsty from Churchill Downs and his Twitter X account, here's the last couple moves for Endlessly. Let's pick him up here. He's on the outside of my boy George, who's a nice stakes horse on the inside from Turfway. This is the first move on April the 6th. What do you make of this one? And then we'll get a chance to see his more recent one on the 13th.
This was okay. I mean, he wasn't scrambling on the dirt at all. He wasn't being pressured. He was going easily. This would be encouraging as far as I'm concerned. Looked like he galloped out well. But his next work, this was not what I wanted to see. And I don't think it was what you wanted to see either. He's kind of being niggled at here, Jeremy. He's laboring. He's not going fast. It'd be different if he was going in 59, but this is just a 49 work. Yeah. I would be discouraged if I were Michael McCarthy based on what I saw here.
Yeah, and the legs are going straight up and down. He's not reaching out, kind of that piston-y action that reminds you of a turf horse. You know, when you see that piston action, you think turf. Now, that doesn't mean a horse with piston action can't be effective on the dirt if they're exceptional. You think of Barbaro, and that's one of the reasons why Barbaro was so hard on himself. He ran straight up and down, but he was a hammer on himself, but he was a machine on any surface. He could run on anything. This did not give me Barbaro kind of feel by any stretch of the imagination. And Michael McCarthy was already hesitant, right? Right after the win in the Jeff Ruby, the thought was we're going to the American turf. That was the public statement. About 10 days later, 7 days later, they started to float around the idea of, well, we're going to be at Churchill anyway. We'll work him on the dirt a few times and then make a decision towards the Kentucky Derby. he on paper and on talent matches up with the top 10 in this class. He is a good 3-year-old, a very good 3-year-old, but they don't play the races in fantasy sports land or just on paper in our mind. They actually run them on a surface, and he doesn't look like he is best on that surface to me. And so they could give him another work and give it one more chance coming up over the weekend, this weekend, and maybe it all clicks for him. But boy, he went the wrong direction. I mean, from the 6th to the 13th, I thought he regressed instead of progressed.
Here's the difficult part. And I don't know what Michael's thinking, but he never really trained. This colt never really trained well at Santa Anita on dirt.
Right.
A lot of horses don't.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we don't know about him is maybe he's just not a good workhorse. What I'd like to see is breeze him on the turf. Now, if he takes to the bridle and breezes like that, then it's the surface. But if he works sloppily on the turf, maybe he's just lazy. You just don't know. So if I were, I would be tempted to try him on grass just to see if he's the same on grass. And if he's much better on grass, pull the plug on the dirt, keep him on grass, and win a lot of purse money. I mean, on the other hand, it's a very difficult situation. But I will say this: if I'm going into a race with Fierceness, having to run against Fierceness and the rest of these that are proven, I might be tempted to say, something. I'm gonna opt for what I know, and I know he's a good grass horse. That's what I would do. But I'm glad he's at least gave it some thought.
Right.
And then, give him a chance to prove otherwise. And I think he's proven otherwise. Go back to the grass and stay there.
Now, 20 can enter the Kentucky Derby, up 4 more in also eligibles. Again, they're going to enter the Saturday out from the race. So a week from this Saturday are entries for the Kentucky Derby. Here's the way in my countdown to the crown.com rankings, I've got them going into this week. This includes what we just saw over the last few days, in which Encino for me has moved up ahead of Endlessly, who I've dropped a little bit off of these dirt works. And look, there's just not much behind number 7, Stronghold, that I feel is a major contender in this year's Kentucky Derby. Beyond the number 7 spot, I think you're looking for horses that, look, they're going to be big numbers. Maybe they can hit the board, but they're just not that interesting to me. I've got Deterministic still on the list at 20th. He bombed in the Wood Memorial. All comments from Christophe Clement in the last few days indicate that they're leaning against running in the race, but the owners will have a decision to make there. If Deterministic comes out as expected, if Endlessly were to come out as perhaps would be the prudent move to do, then the 2 horses sitting next on the list would be Grand Mo the First and Common Defense. Either one of those getting into the field really don't impact, to me, the outcome of the race. So the 20 that we're looking at for this particular race, Jeff, I feel good about 1 through 7. I'm not saying all 7 of those 1 through 7 are win contenders, but when you're talking about tries and supers and things like that, and where you really need to knuckle down on your handicapping, 1 through 7 to me, and then there's a gap.
Yeah, I agree with you there. In fact, I've got a couple of horses that you have in the top 7 that belong in the top 7, but I'm not really that high on, at least in terms of the Derby. Catching Freedom, I think he might be a tad overrated. I thought his win was visually pleasing, but I thought that was a setup. And you know how much I like Just a Touch in the Bluegrass, and he really ran well. Sierra Leone went by him. I thought that Just a Touch had every chance in that race. I don't know whether he's seasoned enough to go to Kentucky. I suppose he belongs there. And I know he might turn out to be a wise guy horse, but I just thought that 1.25 miles with his lack of seasoning, coming off a race in which he really had every chance to beat Sierra Leone. And Sierra Leone went by him like he was standing still. I will be against them. There are a couple others on this list that I'm for, at least in terms of hitting the board, one of which is Stronghold. I really do think he's a relentless, grinding type of colt. I'm pretty sure he is going to wind up and outrun his odds. I'm not saying he'll win. And then Sierra Leone's growing on me. I got to tell you, that is a really, really good colt. He's got a long, extended run. You can start on him before the far turn, and knowing he's not going to flatten out. A lot of horses will. But man, he just keeps coming, And if Fierceness makes a mistake, I'm very confident Sierra Leone's going to run his race.
I do too. I think those two are definitely going to run their race. And that's what's interesting because they have such different running styles. And trip will be important, right? What kind of trip does Fierceness get from the start? And what kind of trip does Sierra Leone get trying to weave through? That's the Kentucky Derby kind of in a nutshell. If they both get bad trips, then you get a weird result in the Kentucky Derby. Right. If one of the two gets the right trip and the other one doesn't, you probably have a pretty handy winner of the Derby in one of those two. And if they both get their trip, batten down the hatches, we could have a hell of a stretch run. These are the ways the Kentucky Derby can shake out in many different scenarios. But certainly this feels to me, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but this feels a lot like 2016 to me, where there was Nyquist and there was Exaggerator. Nyquist was the 2-year-old champ. He was undefeated. He went through the Florida Derby. There was Exaggerator, who they had the big matchup in the San Vicente where they ran close to each other. Then they went their separate ways. They ended up the only 2 horses in the Kentucky Derby in single-digit odds. I think that could be the way the tote shakes out this year, because you've got 3 potential Brad Cox horses, at least 2 in the field. If Encino goes, that's 3, to kind of divide up some of that money amongst people who would be backing the Brad Cox horses. How much money will the Japanese horse take? That's going to be the X factor for the tote board. How much money gets bet on Forever Young in this particular spot? Then it's just those two. Those two are going to take all the money in here, and I think you get 2 in single digits. Everybody else 10-1 and up, and that's exactly what the tote board looked like in 2016 when those 2 favorites ended up running 1-2. And then, of course, they came back in the Preakness, and the Derby runner-up exacted revenge, and we could be sitting in a situation this year that looks a whole lot like 8 years ago.
Yeah, I'm interested to see these final workouts, although I'm looking more for negatives than I am for positives. These are good horses. They're supposed to work well.
Right.
If they go out and work well, yeah, well, of course, they're supposed to. They're good horses. But if you see one that you like that doesn't work well, that to me is the significant part of the observation of the workout, part of the handicapping process. So looking forward to what we'll see this weekend.
I got to admit, I blew the work on Mage last year. I did not like the way he was working into it. And I've done this since 1993. I covered my first Kentucky Derby in person. That's the first time I can remember a horse that I thought didn't work well won the Kentucky Derby. It's like what you're saying. You're looking for the negative, not the positive. Last year it was a misread, or he actually ran better than he had trained. But yes, trust your eyes, watch the works, but don't get enamored with a great work, because a lot of them are going to work great. And pretty soon you're going to find yourself with 9 great looking workers to decide between. Do your handicapping, do your fundamentals. You've done all this work and attention that we've paid on the Triple Crown Trail. Trust those instincts and then use the works as tiebreakers. Bad works, put a horse down. Good works might move a horse up over another one of the ones that you're considering. Now, on our countdown to the crown list, we did not include any horses who are ineligible for the Kentucky Derby, and those, of course, are the ones trained by Bob Baffert at this point. But that could change. The court in Kentucky will rule perhaps as early as tomorrow on Wednesday on the legality of Bob Baffert being able to enter horses in this year's Kentucky Derby. The judge's ruling was some of the hearing was heard on Monday in court in Kentucky. The ruling could come down as early as Wednesday, Jeff. And the horse in question, obviously, is Amir Zidane's Booth, the winner of the Arkansas Derby. He's the only one that we're really considering at this point. And Zidane is the one in the lawsuit. Now, imagination for Baffert could end up in the Kentucky Derby. He was runner-up in the Santa Anita Derby. He's not part of the lawsuit, but if the lawsuit comes and says Churchill can't ban Baffert horses, then all of a sudden Zidane has opened the door also for imagination for different owners perhaps to get in. So there could be potentially 2 Baffert horses in the Derby by the end of this week. We will have to wait and see how the judgment shakes down. I mean, as a handicapper, you're trying to handicap the courts. I'm not good enough to handicap the horses most days. How they're going to rule on this, I'm not sure. I get the gut feeling that this is an 11th hour Hail Mary. And, if they make it, then we're going to have ourselves quite a story and a hubbub going into Louisville.
Well, it also could backfire. Who knows? Maybe Churchill Downs will throw another year at Baffert because of this. Even though he's not the one who's filing the injunction or trying to for the injunction, they'll blame him anyway. So I'm not sure I would be doing this. I would let this thing, pass and then try just to put it behind me. But every time this comes around, there's another reason for Churchill to say, all right, we're going to throw another year on you. I don't know. It doesn't sound promising from what I read from what the judge was saying, but We
Right.
might find out tomorrow, so we'll wait for that.
If you didn't think you had a chance, you would certainly back off the suit, right? Obviously, you
Yeah.
wouldn't pursue it unless you thought you had a horse. Are they right in thinking that, boy, we've got to do everything we can to get Muth into the Kentucky Derby? Is he a legitimate contender to win the thing?
I've already seen Fierceness kind of handle him pretty easily. We saw that in the Breeders' Cup. I would just point for them. I mean, it's a long year. I mean, you'll get your chance to beat Fierceness, later on, whether it's the Preakness or the Belmont or the Travers. I mean, just at this stage, I would say that he wouldn't be my second choice. I like him, but I'm not sure about him going a mile and a quarter, and I'm not sure about his last win. I'm not sure who he beat. So nice horse, but I think I would just move on.
Go fresh into the Preakness, and that's probably his best shot in a Triple Crown race. The Mile 360 with the big hitters coming off of the race 2 weeks ago. Their best move, I don't care what happens in the court, and like sending him to Derby might not work out at all for him, Then you burn him up, and he's not a Preakness horse, not a Belmont horse, and things don't work out. I'm not one who says running the Kentucky Derby and that burns horses out, but in their scenario, they could be sitting on Preakness favoritism if they just wait it out. And so let's see how that shakes out. Those are the discussions on the rankings, the discussion on Muth. And as we mentioned, the Preakness Stakes, there are 3 races this weekend that are berths for the Preakness. If you win this weekend in any of these 3 prep races around the country, you will get a fees paid, an automatic berth and spot into the field for the Preakness Stakes coming up in mid-May. The Federico Tessio at 1 mile and an eighth at Laurel Park, the local prep in Maryland. At Oaklawn, the Bathhouse Row, a race that was initiated a couple years ago when they extended the racing season at Oaklawn. That one on Saturday. And then on Sunday at Hawthorne, it's the First Bet Illinois Derby. So we will have the sponsorship of that race, and the Illinois Derby returns to the schedule on Sunday. Automatic berth into the Preakness coming out of the Hawthorne Derby. So 3 races this weekend could produce 3 of the starters towards the middle jewel of the Triple Crown. That's our Triple Crown tracker as we move out of the 3-year-old division and go back to our big board for our third topic this week. We're going all the way to the Distaff division, the older fillies and mares. I misspoke on one of the podcasts earlier this week when I said, with Idiomatic out of the scene, Idiomatic's not out of the scene. She just hasn't run yet this year, but she may have some competition in the division because Adair Manor, they gave her the lead and the race was over in the Apple Blossom at Oaklawn. Let's take a look at that and get Jeff's reaction.
Adair Manor quickening that pace. Shotgun Hottie chasing in the second spot. Free Like a Girl calls it a day. So does Honor D Lady. Bella Moray into the 3rd position with Free Like a Girl. They've got to get going. And then comes Taxed as they come down the lane. Adair Manor has scampered away. She's gone 4 ahead with a big kick. And she's opening up now. Adair Manor by 5 with a furlong to go. Coming flying down the outside is the big long shot. Flying Connection. But Adair Manor has a 6-length lead. And she is back in business. Adair Manor wins it in devastating fashion under Juan Hernandez. Flying Connection 2nd, Free Like a Girl 3rd, and Shotgun Hottie completes the superfecta. Adair Manor looking strong in the Apple Blossom.
Distaff division does have some strong names to it. Adair Manor, Idiomatic, Nest is back in training, and pointed towards some races in New York this summer. So this could be a heck of a division on all fronts, Jeff.
Adair Manor was 2nd in her seasonal debut behind Sweet Azteca, a Michael McCarthy trained filly who will not pursue the longer races. She did beat her in the Beholder Mile. But I think Adair Manor in that race wasn't able to make the lead because that filly is a very fast filly who was able to dominate the Beholder of Gate to Wire. But in races in which Adair Manor is able to establish the running, as she did in this race, she's never lost. And so I think while she doesn't need the lead to win, you can't beat her if she does. And that's what I think Bob Baffert's going to be looking for, races in which there appears to be a lack of early speed or her kind of early speed, which could be the longer races. I see no reason why Adair Manor won't go a mile and eighth even farther if she ever needs to do that. So and she's a 5-year-old daughter of Uncle Mo. They tend to get better with age. She's a big strapping filly who I think is Mare who's getting into her best form. So that was visually pleasing. The triple-digit buyer was just the 2nd triple-digit buyer that she's ever earned. So this put her in a position to now for Bob Baffert to try to pick his spots with this really talented mare. And I think there's a good chance that by season's end, she's going to be right up there with the best in her division.
Now, you've got the Breeders' Cup on the West Coast this year, so she can stay home probably from this point forward and pick her spots on the West Coast and leave Nest in New York, leave Idiomatic in Kentucky, and let them go for the Beldames and the Spinsters and see what kind of regional showdown we get come Breeders' Cup Distaff time. But she could be the tops in the West, obviously, at 1 1/8 on the main track, like as she showed in the Apple Blossom at 1 16. The 1 1/8 will not be any problem for a dare matter. When she gets the lead, she's awfully tough. Now, a horse who made the lead on Saturday at Oaklawn Park did it so fast you wondered if he could keep going. There was no problem at all for Skelly in the big race in Hot Springs for the sprinters, the Count Fleet. With all apologies to Stanley Burrell, former bat boy for the Oakland A's, also known as MC Hammer. They couldn't touch him. Can't touch this is the headline for Skelly's Count Fleet performance.
Chip here on the dirt. Skelly has opened up the lead to 3 now around the turn. I'm Wide Awake, Perfect Dude have given way. Happy as a Choice picks up the running in the second position. Jackson Traveler not picking it up. Rivet is trying to pass runners at 8 lengths to gain on his stablemate. Tejano Twist dead last as they come off the turn. Skelly 3/16 to go has a 3-length lead. Happy as a Choice second. Tejano Twist rolling down the center of the track. Skelly furlong to go. He's gone 5 ahead now. Tejano Twist unleashed with his late rally, but Skelly is too far ahead, and Skelly coming to the line is going to do it. He's going to win the Count Fleet. He's back in the States and back here as a top sprint contender this 2024 year. Tejano Twist was second, Happy as a Choice third, and Rivet was fourth.
Those look like Turf Paradise splits, not splits you see at Oaklawn. 43-4 and going 108 and change. And this was off the return from Saudi Arabia. The trip no worse for the wear. Skelly's pretty darn cool.
And he didn't even break in this race. I mean, he broke absolutely last, rushed up, did that rush up that never works, opened up. But this time, he just kept going. This was the 8th consecutive win in North America for Skelly. I say you can't touch him. You can't touch this. You certainly can't touch him at Oaklawn. He's now won 7 out of 9 with 1 second. And as a 5-year-old, he is ready to take on the best in the States. And I think Steve Asmussen obviously will be pointing and working backwards from the Breeders' Cup Sprint and try to map out a campaign that will bring him to that race at Del Mar in peak form. He mentioned maybe a race at Saratoga that would be, but he's a gelding, so keep him going for as long as you can. And I think the way his form is, he looks like arguably, potentially the best sprinter in the States. And although he was beaten in Saudi Arabia on that deep track, he paid the price late. Got worn down late, but certainly ran a winning race in that. What was that? A $15 million race? I can't even remember what it was. But anyway, I love this horse because you can't touch him. You can't beat him. At least you can at Oaklawn. Now we'll see if he can get out of his comfort zone. Oaklawn, we'll see him maybe next time at Churchill. But I really think he's the kind of horse that probably will remain undefeated, because I think Steve's going to run him in races that he knows he can win.
It'll be interesting to see what the campaign looks like, because I went back and looked at some of his stable predecessors. I think this was like the 6th or 7th time that Asmussen has won the Count Fleet. But some of his recent horses, Justin Phillip won this race in 2013. He went on to run in the True North, the Vanderbilt, the Forgo, the Vosburg, the Smile. And then we look at Jackie's Warrior. He won this race a couple years ago. He went on to run in the Churchill Downs Handicap, the True North, the Vanderbilt, the Forgo before the Breeders' Cup. And then Matoli won this race in 2019 in his championship season. He went on to run in the Churchill Downs Handicap, Met Mile, Vanderbilt, Forgo, and then on to the Breeders' Cup. So Steve is going to run his sprinters a lot, and they're going to run in a lot of big dances. Now, not all those horses had big trips around the world early in the season like Skelly did. So does that change the plan for the rest of the year, because that was maybe more demanding of a spring than some of those other ones had. But he's going to run in a lot of races. There's going to be a lot of New York in here. You heard those names over and over again: True North, Vanderbilt, Forgo. Like, those 3 races are all going to be in the mix for Skelly. And then, of course, you got to come west then for the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, not all those horses were geldings either. I don't know if he'll treat this horse a little bit differently, because most of those horses were going to be stallions, and this one, he'd like to have him run till he's 9. So I don't know if he'll be as aggressive. But on the other hand, that's where the money is. And I think Steve's going to do that and give Skelly an opportunity to clean up in New York. And why shouldn't he? Who around can beat him? I don't know. There's some good horses. And I felt sorry for Tejano Twist, because he's really a favorite of mine. And he's probably the horse thinking, can you go somewhere already? All right. This is like the Lakers trying to beat the Nuggets. You can't do it, so why somebody go somewhere else,
Yeah, once they spread out from each other, then Tejano Twist will find himself the winner's circle again, because he's an honest type. Let's go to our final topic each week. It's the Stars of Tomorrow. We're looking for somebody coming out of the maiden or the allowance ranks sometimes that have a stakes future about them. You do not see this very often. A 2-turn winner debuting on turf at Keeneland. It had been about 6 years since it's happened in a spring meet, and this regally bred colt came out and did it this past weekend. Let's take a look at Ready for Sherrill.
Ready for Sherrill and Spaladay from the outside. Pin up Betty up the inside. Ready for Sherrill. Spaladay. Pin up Betty to the inside. Ready for Sherrill coming forward. Has a narrow lead. Ready for Sherrill and Florent Giroux now kicking clear in the closing strides. It is Ready for Sherrill to win it. It'll be Pin up Betty second, Spaladay third, and Scarlet Poppy fourth.
So Ready for Sherrill for the veteran Hall of Fame Canadian trainer Roger Atfield. He's still got a hand with a good runner, and this one's just got that immaculate pedigree, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, she's out of the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf winner of 2011. Perfect Sherrill. She herself was a half-sister to Shakespeare and Lady Shakespeare. It's all long-distance grass, and if that weren't enough, this is a daughter of More Than Ready, who probably is a prolific a grass sire as we have in North America. So, and she did it the right way. She was 7-1. You think even if she trained terrible, you'd probably use her just on the pedigree alone.
Yeah.
But again, another situation where she's a grass horse working on dirt. She wasn't going to show much. She didn't show much. Put her on the lawn where she belongs, and this is what you get. I think this is a filly who will obviously, go through the ranks among the 3-year-old filly grass horses. Kentucky bred, not Canadian bred. That's the first thing I thought about, but she's not. So she'll be down here, and now it's just a matter of how aggressive they want to get with her. I'd like to see her go through her conditions, but they might just jump right into stakes competition. And who's to say that Ready for Sherrill won't be capable of doing just that?
Let's throw a little bonus topic at you this week, because Jeff and I, when we come back on Friday, we'll handicap some weekend stakes races for you. But between now and then, there's a carryover to talk about on Thursday at Gulfstream Park in the late pick 5, a pick 5 carryover at Gulfstream Park. 6-figure carryover. We've got local handicapper Brian Nadeau from Gulfstream Park to give you his key to get you started on that late pick 5 Thursday at Gulfstream.
Brian Nadeau with you. We're taking a look at one of my key plays on the Thursday card. This race 4 is a really tricky one on the turf. There's a lot of horses that have been at the level, and there's a few coming in off wins against lesser. I'm going to go with one of them, and that is down on the inside. The one, Busy Morning, off the claim, off a solid win last time over 2 L's. Yeah, we're stepping up in class, but I like the way she did it, and I like the tactical speed that she's got in this spot, too. We can either save ground or we can be in front, and we know this turf course, when it's fast and firm, it plays to speed. So let's go that way in race number 4 on Thursday to the one, Busy Morning.
And our topics this week on It's Official, we've got Taking the Initiative, the aggressive ride by Florent Giroux to get Encino to the winner's circle in the Lexington Stakes. Our Triple Crown tracker took you down to Gulfstream, and words from Todd Pledger and a look at Fierceness, the Kentucky Derby favorite in his training. Some less than stellar training at Churchill Downs from Endlessly, the synthetic specialist. We got a look at the top 20 rankings. We discussed Muth, who could or could not be back in the Kentucky Derby picture. We're going to find out in the next 24 hours or so. And we looked ahead to some Preakness preps this weekend. You give her the lead, and Adair Manor knows it's all over. She was wire to wire in the Apple Blossom at Oaklawn. And as Jeff mentioned, she's never been beaten when handed the front end. Can't touch this. It's Kelly down at Oaklawn, dancing his way to the winner's circle, 108 and change in the Count Fleet, and just continues to dominate the local stock there. And our star of the future, Ready for Sherrill, on the grass for Roger Outfield at Keeneland. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's the way we play the game. And that's going to wrap up this edition of It's Official. Almost. I've got one more thing to throw at you this week. Today on Tuesday, as we record our podcast, Jeff, they are running the Highland Ice Stakes at Will Rogers Downs in Claremore, Oklahoma. Highland Ice, I know you're not familiar with, but he's a horse near and dear to me. He was the top Oklahoma bred back in the 90s, a sprinter who won everything. He won 15 races at Remington Park, which that record stood for 20 years until Welder recently knocked off his record of most career victories at Remington Park. But one day, Highland Ice wasn't a winner. It was a day when we were doing a live telecast on CBS in Oklahoma City, and I guaranteed he would win the Chuck Talaferro Memorial Handicap. At that point in his career, he'd run at Remington 9 times, Highland Ice. He had 7 wins, 2 narrow seconds. He had just beaten a horse named Run Johnny in the most recent start, the Silver Bullet Centennial. Coming back into Talaferro, I thought, there's no way he'll lose this particular race. So I guaranteed victory, and I said, if he doesn't win this race, I'll run the distance myself next week on the CBS show. You know how this turned out for Highland Ice, don't you? And how it turned out for me 27 years ago now, 1997, I ran the distance. I went to the turf, Jeff. I switched up and ran on the grass that day instead of the dirt because really I couldn't run that far. It was only 5.5 furlongs. But for me at that age and at that weight, 5.5 was a struggle that day. So Highland Ice is a horse who's near and dear to me. He got beat that day by Run Johnny, who ran 5.5, and get this, 102 flat. It's a track record that still stands, 1997 track record stands here, 27 years later. But the Highland Ice Stakes today, check that one out in Claremore. And the dirtiest look I ever got from a trainer in my life was when Chuck Turco, the trainer of Highland Ice, walked down the ramp at Remington Park to unsaddle his horse, and he just glared at me because everybody had heard that I just guaranteed that his horse couldn't lose. So I put the jinx on him, and Chuck never forgave me for that. But I lived up to it. I ran the distance myself the next week, and it's all part of history.
See, if I'd been me, I wouldn't have run it. I would have drove it. Get in the car. I say, hey, I'm going to go 5.5. I didn't say I had to run it. I put it, get in my car. It's like they have these 5K, things, these marathons on Derby Day or at Santa Anita. I tell people I'm not running it, but I'll drive it.
I'd not go 5K. 5.5 was enough at that time. It was funny because I went back and visited Remington Park several years ago, my young daughter and wife, and they played the video of me doing that on the Jumbotron. And my daughter's watching it, and she said, my God, Dad, you looked young and really fat back then. So it was a struggle to get through the 5.5. I'm glad it wasn't 5K. And I'm glad Highland Ice wasn't running like a 1.125 that day. I would have never made it. So Highland Ice Stakes today. Had some fun going back memory lane with that. So enjoy that one in Claremore, Oklahoma today, where they run it at Will Rogers Downs. Jeff and I are going to be back on Friday, as we mentioned, with our First Call podcast, where we'll handicap 8 stakes races from around the country on Saturday, including those 3 big Preakness win and you're in type races, automatic qualifying berth going to the Preakness Stakes on those 3 stakes that we'll handicap for Saturday. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you then.